Hi everyone, my name is Dipen. I'm a product designer with over 15 years experience in design and I live out of Bangalore. Over the past 6-8 months, design tools and processes have evolved drastically with AI. Companies are changing the way they are looking at designers, and a designer is not just supposed to design, but he's supposed to ship end-to-end experiences and also make the products live as well. I'm also on a similar journey of learning and using AI to augment my design workflow. The idea of creating this video was, to share my design process in terms of how it has evolved over the past few months and hopefully help, fellow designers who are on a similar journey to take something away from it. Doing a lot of whiteboarding and trying to find, meaningful problem statements in my real life which I encounter and try to see if I can, make some prototype or make some products live. One such interesting problem statement which I identified was related to my PF and pension money. Over the last decade or so, my PF and pension money kept on getting accumulated, and I never bothered to check it. So one fine day last month, I decided to see what is the process like of viewing the PF, and if I were to withdraw it, what would it be like? It was such a tedious and painful process, and anyone who's actually been through the process of viewing the PF, transferring the PF, as well as withdrawing the PF, knows the pain that one person has to go through, right? So it took me almost a month to figure out, what are different set of processes which are there, what are different portals. I took help from my mentor and with the help of ChatGPT just to understand the different workflows which are there, because and the portal are so confusing that it becomes very difficult for any layman to do this process very seamlessly. So I'll just give you an example. So there are three portals which are typically there in one mobile app. One is basically this portal which is called passbook .epf.gov.in, where a person can just view the EPF passbook and the claim status in terms of what is the balance and all. The second is basically the member portal, where a person has to log in and UAN, and they can view the employment history, transfer the companies to one account. A user has to do the bank KYC, Aadhaar KYC, and PAN KYC just to be able to apply to claims. Then a person has to go to the claim section, and there are two forms where a person can withdraw full or partial, and there are separate workflows for withdrawing the pension money as well as the EF money, and there's no proper help and support section in this. And then there is a separate portal just for the grievance management and all. So the entire workflow is so confusing. The pain points that I identified were, even though there are these three separate workflows which are totally, disjointed, the site is also very unreliable, right? The site is too slow. There are too many session timeouts which keep on happening, too many unnecessary captchas and authentications which are required, which are totally unnecessary. Also, there's no proper way to understand, where to do what, right? So it's more of a trial and error a person has to do. Based on the list of issues which I identified, right, I thought this can be an interesting case study. And if I were to look at it from a designer's lens in terms of redesign, how would I approach it? So since I had already done research with ChatGPT in terms of different processes, and also had taken screenshots of, you know, the EPFO portal and the passbook portal and the Umang app, which is basically, the similar thing which it does. Then I had also listed down the list of use cases and the pain points which I identified. And then what I did was I asked ChatGPT to create like a PRD. Then, it created the first draft of the PRD. I had to refine a couple of iterations and, add a few use cases which I thought were missing. And once the PRD was sort of ready, right, then I said, let me see what is the solution which I have in mind, right? So the solution it identified was, to create a mobile app which can be very handy. And the idea of the mobile app was the app has to be so seamless. It can view the PF balance, it can transfer the money, the person can view the service history. They can, understand the help and support section. Also, they can, apply for claims and track claims as well, right? So I try to create, this entire thing, via Claude Code using a prototype. So here's what Claude Claude created, right? So my process was, I, created a folder which was basically, it had multiple screenshots from EPFO as well as the Umang. Then, I had given my PRD as well, which had list of use cases and everything, and, asked it to, create like a prototype first cut. I had to do a few, iterations on it, and I also had to give it a design style. I used the screenshot of the EPFO portal and, gave some context in terms of what kind of, color palette as well as, the fonts and whatever I have to give it to them. And it created a, decent, prototype, which I felt, was kind of useful as well as, intuitive. So I'll just walk you through the prototype in terms of what I have created. So this is basically the splash screen where, you come. You have to log in via the UAN number, which is basically a 12-digit UAN. You enter the UAN number, then, it asks for verifying the OTP, which is coming on your verified mobile number. Then, it will say that, whether your Aadhaar, your bank account, your PAN number is verified or not. Obviously, these are separate workflows which are there. Typically, to verify your Aadhaar and bank account, you will probably, it will ask for an OTP and all. And similarly for PAN as well, right? So here, it is assumed that, these things are done. And when I click on PAN as well, when you click on fix it, it is verified. But ideally, it should be, it should ask for an OTP on your mobile number. And, once we enter the OTP, it will verify it. So then you can continue to the dashboard. So this is basically the dummy data which is typically shown of, let's say, Rohan Verma. And here, upfront you are able to see the PF balance, right? And here it will say that, what is the employer contribution, and what is basically the pension amount which is there. So everything is very simple and very clear. And, what was the last updated, time, or, what was the last contribution and all. There are, four options of navigation which are typically shown. Firstly is basically if a person wants to view the passbook. So there are two different entry points, one from here and one from here. So a person can view the passbook history of, all the employers which are there. There's a, option to, filter by different employers. Second, if a person wants to view the employment history, he'll see the list of all the employers and he can see the employment history which is there. And once a person clicks on it, he'll be able to see the details of the contribution, so on and so forth, right? The next part I want to show is basically, transferring, right? So here there is basically a smart nudge where it tells that, okay, so much, money is pending for transfer, because you cannot apply for a withdrawal until you have transferred all the money to your previous or current organization, right? So here's the workflow for that. It will say that, this much amount is basically pending and, it needs to be transferred. It will ask you which, accounts you need to be, you want to transfer from, right? From different companies. Then it will also tell, where is it transferring to, and it will also give you a confirmation that you want to transfer to your current employer or your past employer. Ideally, it is better to, transfer to the current employer. Then you have to, check, right, which bank account, is linked to it. And then it will, ask you to review all the details which is there, and it will ask you to submit a transfer request. And once that is done, you can view the transfer status which is there, right? So this is very simple and easy to do. The next part is, which I want to show, is related to, claims, right? So person can, as I mentioned, withdraw the full PF, so do a partial withdrawal or do a full pension withdrawal, right? Let's go through one workflow of full PF withdrawal. Now there are different options in terms of why a person can withdraw. So let's take the example of, basically, if there is a medical emergency and you want the PF money to be withdrawn, right? So let me click on this option and continue. Then it will say what is the maximum eligible amount you need to transfer, right? And here basically I've given like a slider where you can decide in terms of whether you want to withdraw the full money or not. Well, assume you want to withdraw 1,20,000 and you click on continue. It will ask you, is this a bank account that you want to transfer it to? Yes. Otherwise, you can add a separate bank account which is there. Then you can upload your supporting documents, right? So let's say there is a hospital prescription and what is the amount of treatment estimate which is there. You upload that, and once you click on continue, it will ask for a review, and you can submit the claim, right? And your claim is submitted, and you can then start tracking the claim status which is there. And if the claim is settled, then you can see that this entire process has been completed. And as I had mentioned, there is one more workflow which is there, which is help and support, which is really very confusing. So I created a help and support section as well, where a person can, look at the toll-free helpline, email it, or, ask a frequently asked question in terms of, what is the process of transferring, how can I view the thing. And also a person can, raise a grievance from here itself, right? So I have tried to make the app entirely simple and smooth, because rather than having multiple portals and a separate mobile app which is very slow and very confusing, a seamless mobile app which is simple and intuitive can actually ease the life of a lot of people who are going through this pain, right? So what I also thought of, since I've already made this prototype, and if I want to create a case study out of it, how do I do it, right? So I use Claude and give the entire artifacts, right, in terms of, again, the PRD, then the prototype, then the screenshots, everything. And I also gave it case study structure of how the case study should be in terms of the different sections. And then Claude was able to kind of create a beautiful case study in terms of what were the problems which I identified, what were the goals, who were the persona, what is the workflow which I did, what were some of the design decisions which I took, right? The existing designs which are there of the EPFO portal, so on and so forth, right? And the Umang app, and I also incorporated the prototype of what I had created, right? And also just gave the outcome in terms of what are the things I would have done differently, so on and so forth, right? So this will probably be a very good process in terms of how I standardize my design workflow. And also, if I have to upload this PRD or the case study on my personal website or vibe coded projects, this will be a rough structure and I can use it, so on and so forth, right? So I hope you found this helpful, and if you have any thoughts, comments, please share it with me. Thank you.